Hey friends, I'm Heidi Rose Robbins, and this is episode 38 of the Radiance Project, a podcast dedicated to astrology, poetry, inspiration, and very good company. And my very good company today is Lynn Jordan. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Heidi.
She's a fellow Aries. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here.
Let me tell you about sweet Lynn in my life. Lynn is among the little tribe of women who you've heard from. Erin Schleba, I think she was like episode 31, and Meredith Hunt, and Lynn Jordan. We're all this little sweet pack, and we all support each other and help one another. And so I'm so happy that you're here today. And now let me tell people about you, all right? Lynn is the creator of Joyful Boogie. I just love that name so much. And it's a program to empower senior citizens to express themselves through dance and song. Come on. I love that. And it is beautiful. I've seen so many gorgeous pictures, and she's magic at this. She's also the founder of Create Your Career from the Inside Out. And we're going to talk about both of these things. Her Create Your Career program is a 6-step process to help people move into a new job that is more in alignment with who they are, or become more fulfilled in the job they currently have. And it's a great process. It's an illuminating process, and I've watched her help a lot of people. And she's also a producer for large-scale galas for locally based nonprofits like Heal the Bay, Homeboy Industries, Grades of Green, all incredibly worthy organizations. She's a producer. She's done many, many things. She holds a BA in music, for goodness sake. She's again sort of this Renaissance woman energy. So I'm so happy you're here, and I want to talk with you about so many things.
Okay, like what?
Oh wait, first I have to tell. I always do this, isn't it funny? Here I'm an astrologer, and I always forget to tell people. Oh. Okay, so do you remember your three positions?
I certainly do.
Okay, Lynn, what are you?
Okay. My sun is in Aries, like you, Heidi Rose Robbins.
Yes.
My moon is in Gemini.
Yes.
And my rising sign is Aquarius.
Perfection. And that's interesting for Lynn and myself because we're both Aries, but Lynn is calling in the energy opposite Leo, which is my rising sign. So in a group, you're calling in the whole energy of group dynamic, and that's something you love more than anything, right?
Pretty much.
I mean, I don't think I've known anybody who loves to create groups and facilitate them and be in them and energize them and stimulate them as much as Lynn.
Oh my gosh, thanks.
I think that is very true of you. And I want to talk more about your Aquarian nature.
Sweet.
Yeah. But I want to actually go back a little ways, my friend, and I want to start in a kind of unusual place. There are two things I want to ask you about. The first thing, I actually would love you to start with your dad.
Oh, gosh.
And I would love you to tell us a little bit about your dad, like from whence you come. And then I have another question. But
Sure. And I'm happy to. So my father, his name is Fred Jordan. And Fred Jordan was born Alfred Rotblat in 1925 in Vienna, Austria. And his bar mitzvah in 1938 was the night of Kristallnacht.
Oh my God.
And that was the night that Hitler, quote unquote, invaded Vienna, when in fact, actually, he was greeted by 10,000 people. But that was the night that my grandfather bribed his way out of the country, leaving my father, his sister, and their mother. And through the Kindertransport, my father and his sister were able to leave Vienna. My father was given passage to London, and his sister came to the United States. And their mother was not able to get out, and she ended up dying in Auschwitz. And my father found his way to the United States after the war. He returned to Vienna. He had, after 10 years, reunited with his father. His father had survived through hiding out in Brussels. And they were given a one-way passage to New York on a boat. And they arrived in Ellis Island. And when they arrived, my grandfather insisted that they change the family name because it sounded German to him, even though that was not a German name. And so my father chose the name Jordan. And
Do you know why he chose Jordan?
there are different myths, family myths that happen. So he told me, the one I'm going with is he met a man named Peter on the boat who was changing his name to Jordan, and he thought that that was also a fine biblical name to choose.
Okay.
So that's the story I'm going with.
And then your father, did he immediately get into the publishing business, or what was his
No.
journey?
So he arrived, he arrived in New York, took a train out. Here's the story of my father. My father arrived in New York with $30 borrowed dollars, took a train out to Los Angeles to meet his sister, was robbed on the train.
Oh my gosh.
So he was literally penniless when he got here. And his sister came out to Los Angeles. And then he started looking for a job. He hitchhiked up to San Francisco. He was just taking any kind of work. But here's the thing. When he was on the boat coming over here, people were getting sick left and right, and it was just a miserable passage. But he made friends with the captain and would listen to the news and created a daily news bulletin that he distributed, and then would mimeograph, by hand. And he mimeographed and he would distribute it to all of the passengers, and that's what kept him busy. So he wanted to go into journalism.
Oh.
And so he was looking for a break into journalism. He ended up hitchhiking across the country to come back to to New York, and ended up getting a job on. I don't know if this is all these little tiny details. An astrologer hired him. Oh, Heidi.
Really?
Yes. So here's
I don't know this.
Yeah, I totally forgot this. So my father, there was something called the rag trades, where you could trade on rag options, like pieces of cloth that are used to wipe things up, rags. There were rag options that you could trade in. There was a newspaper that covered the rag trade.
Oh my gosh.
And the person who owned that newspaper interviewed him, and he was an astrologer.
Oh my gosh.
And asked my father, and so, because he lived in Colorado. And so he was not even there, and gave my father the paper to run. He was an editor and wrote for the rag trades based on his astrological.
What was your father's birthday?
November 9th.
Oh, Scorpio.
Super Scorpio.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
November 9th, 1920.
Tenacity. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and then from there he ended up somehow getting an interview with Grove Press, which was the publishing company. They ended up spending many decades working for Barney Rossett, who was the publisher, and he started out in doing sales, and then became an editor, and then ended up editing a lot.
Yeah, and he published all kinds of great writers of the day.
So Grove Press is known for publishing the beat authors and other political figures like Abby Hoffman. And
it's such an incredible story. And I mean, I just even think astrologically, the moon is the position that our childhood, where we come from. And, your moon in Gemini is so steeped in the message, the word, and just connecting people and connecting ideas. And your father, boy, I mean, tenacity and intelligence and...
Yeah, and sensitivity.
Yeah.
And a lot of intuition as well.
Wow.
And this incredible, and he's also very childlike in that he's very open and wants to learn and listen and take people in and with a real genuine curiosity. To this day, he's 92. Yeah.
I don't know. Every time I thought about us talking, I just was like, we have to start with her dad.
Okay.
So it's a powerful, powerful story, and you are his daughter. And what do you feel are the greatest gifts he's given you? How do you feel him in you?
My father and I are so alike in the way that we process information is really similar. So like our brains work in a really similar way. We have very similar tastes in things like art and music and food and our senses of humor, and we make each other laugh, and he's very playful and spontaneous. And I think I really got a lot of adventure and spontaneity from my father.
You are that for sure. Yeah. The delight. I mean, that's something that I so deeply appreciate about you is your sense of curiosity about with anyone you meet, you know, and you do draw them out and you do want to learn and you are like, who are you? That's how I feel like, who are you?
Totally.
I always say that Lynn is the diplomat of the Radiant Life Retreats because whenever there's somebody new that comes in, she's like, who are you? let me teach you about this group. Or, you know, it's like wonderful.
Where do you come from?
Where do you come from?
What's your story?
What do you most want in your life? How can I help you cultivate it? Like we're there in 7 minutes. She's already at the cultivation. Truly, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so another story that I'm sorry I just have to have you hear. And I actually haven't heard this story in years and years and years, but the first time you and I met, you told me this story, and it always stays with me, which is when you got obsessed with the piece of music in college.
Right.
I know you didn't expect to go there. I promise when we talk about your work.
Okay. So, all right. So here's the story. Here's the story. And actually it links to my father, which I just learned 2 years ago.
Oh, good.
I grew up pretty much with a reading problem. Like so ironically, my father, the publisher, I was not a reader. I would look at a page and I thought something was wrong with my eyesight, but it wasn't. I was actually really anxious. So I would look at the page and instead of seeing letters, I would see the negative space in between the letters. And that made it very difficult to learn to read. And then the worst fear was to be asked to read something out loud, as it was just utter torture for myself and for anybody else who was in the room. It was just horrific. As a result, I somehow graduated high school having never read a book. And I would listen, so I cultivated a really, really astute ability to listen and to take copious notes. And that's how I got there. And I never told anybody.
Wow.
So, and the summer between, and I played the violin very poorly. And the summer between sophomore and junior years in high school, I went to a music camp. And in the music camp, we played Beethoven's First Symphony. And I was in the second violin section, appropriately. And because I could barely even keep up with it. But sitting in the second violin section and listening to the rehearsals, I, by ear, heard every instrument's line. And so I memorized every instrument's line of the entire symphony. And then it just stayed with me and I couldn't shake it. So it was in my head. So when I went to school, and so happy, I went to a boarding school for 11th and 12th grades. And instead, whenever I was assigned to read something, I would open up the book and then Beethoven's First Symphony would start to play in my head and I couldn't make it stop. And then what would happen is it would take its repeats and it would repeat over and like I couldn't bring it to a cadence and I couldn't bring it to the close and because it would go because it's written in a way where everything is repeated anyway. So that's the structure of the piece. So it plagued me. Beethoven's First Symphony plagued me. So I felt I had no other option but to become a music major in college. I didn't really want to study music, but I couldn't get it out of my head.
Yeah.
So I became a music major and I started singing, and I studied Elizabethan music, which was different than Beethoven, but which was great and wonderful, and it required a lot of intellectual ability mathematical ability to keep counterpoint, and I loved it, and the harmonics, and I loved it. And yet, Beethoven's First Symphony wouldn't get out of my head. So I didn't read anything in college either. So finally, my sophomore year, I was dating someone from another college, and I was, during my spring break, was at his school, and he had a really big music library. And I just decided that that was it. I was going to exorcise this from my mind. And I went and I pulled the score out of the library, and I got a recording of it. And I put on the headphones, and it was like taking this beast and putting it on the table and like mustering up all this I mean, it makes me cry now, mustering up like all this courage to like take this on.
Wow.
And I was just determined to get this friggin' piece out of my head. So I put the needle on the record, and I opened up the score, and I just followed it, and I was like, I'm taking you down, you fucking bastard. And so I went through the whole score, and when it was done, I just felt like really courageous. Like, I don't know what's going to happen from there, but I felt like that was a really huge step.
Mm. Mm.
And then I went and I finished school. It took 5 years to finish school finally. And then my boyfriend at the time, who was just so wonderful, he was a classical guitarist and just so loving. And we moved in together right after college. And we picked up a copy of Franny and Zoe and by J.D. Salinger. And we read it out loud to each other. And he was so patient with me. And I sat with him, and he let me read the book out loud. And so we read it together. And at the end of that, I was like, I fucking read a book. This is amazing. This is great.
Wow.
And then he was also really into Russian authors like Dostoevsky. So there was I was going to say an episode, but there is a copy of Crime and Punishment on the coffee table. So I picked up Crime and Punishment, and I started reading it myself.
Mm.
And I went through it very, slowly, and I just let myself do it very slowly, like just a couple of pages a day. And I went through, and I went from cover to cover eventually and finished Crime and Punishment.
Wow.
And that was the first book that I read cover to cover, and it felt so victorious.
Yeah, talk about a first book to read cover to cover. That's insane. It makes me want to find out what was going on for you astrologically at that time, because it must have had to do with your Gemini or your,
Probably.
But wow.
But yeah. Yes, it was amazing. So then the button to the story is, and then I went to work, and I opened up the New York Times, and I was like, I have to celebrate. So I'm going to take myself to Carnegie Hall, and I cannot make this up. And I opened up the New York Times, like, what's playing at Carnegie Hall? And there was a visiting symphony that came in, and the program that night was Beethoven's First Symphony. So I went and I got a ticket, and I sat in the front row of the mezzanine, right?
Wow.
Our producer, friends, just so that you know, our producer, Karen, is reacting, she's laughing. Okay. And so I got a front row mezzanine seat. I just wept the whole time because it really felt like I had exercised this beast, and I was done, and it was behind me.
Oh, were you there by yourself?
I was there by myself. Now here's the epilogue to that story.
Yeah. This is your father connection.
My father. So my father shared an interesting story with me a couple of years ago. Which I had never known. So my father told me this story just a couple of years ago, which no one in our family knew, was that, so in Europe, or in Vienna definitely, you're put on the academic track really early. So from what's equivalent to our elementary school, you have to take an entrance exam to get into what's equivalent to our middle school, and that's the academic track. And if you fail that, then you are at the age of 12, put into the like a laborer's track. Yeah. Well, my father failed the entrance exam for the gymnasium, the math part, and it was such a huge blemish on the family that no one was able to talk about it. So he was placed his father arranged for him to go to another school to repeat the 5th grade, our equivalent to our 5th grade, so that he could take the entrance exam again. And he also failed the math portion. And what he told me was he had such horrible test anxiety. And when he looked at the paper, he wouldn't see the characters. He would see the negative spaces in between the characters. So I inherited that anxiety from him completely subconsciously.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And it dictated my entire academic career.
And it's just so fascinating that he ended up.
And so ironically,
Yes.
so then when Hitler came to invade, he was ecstatic because he wouldn't have to go to school anymore because he was such a huge blemish on the family. He thought, well, what could possibly be worse than the torture he was in at that time?
Wow.
Which I think helped him survive because his attitude was, well, this is better. Whatever's happening is better than where I am now.
Wow.
Whatever's happening, like he also didn't register. It didn't register to him what was really happening.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But that was his attitude at that time. And he has maintained that attitude throughout his life. And so, so unwittingly, Heidi, you're actually asking like one long question, which is totally related.
It's so powerful. And, and I just want to say, like, listen, friends, this is the moon in Gemini. This is the storyteller, right? This is, this story is so rich and deep and truth-telling and revealing and, the lineage of family. And why I smiled as you were starting to tell the epilogue is that if in fact the book reading was right around 89 and 90, you had Jupiter, the planet of opportunity and growth, sitting on your moon in Gemini. That only happens once every 12 years. And starting in 88, your progressed moon had moved into Aries, which is a fresh start.
Yes.
Which is a new beginning. And your progressed ascendant, almost at the exact same time, had moved into Aries. So it was this totally fresh start. So it's so fascinating. When somebody tells a story like that, I've got to look at the chart and say what was going on, because it's so significant. And it's such a beautiful story about, like, who would think that through music you basically learn to read, or you liberate yourself into reading, or and the whole thing about the negative space is fascinating.
Yeah, it's great. I love that you have that perspective, Heidi, because to me it was like, well, that was a phase, and then I moved on. Like that is just like one phase of so many. And
well, it was one phase, and then you launched into this whole new phase. Yeah, and I would say to you also, it was interesting in early 1990, your progressed sun that spends 30 years in every sign had moved into Taurus. So it's like you can exhale. It's not a sign of anxiety. It's a sign of like, oh. Yeah. Now I'm grounded. Now I can see. Now I can walk. Now I can breathe.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing those. I know that goes a ways back, but it feels so instrumental too. And there's such powerful stories. And you told me that story when I first met you, and I was like, who is this woman? This was before we had become friends.
That's true.
We were just getting to know each other, and I was like, I just sat there with my jaw on the floor. But I didn't remember huge sections, so I'm just delighted I asked you again.
Oh my gosh.
So, my friend, I do want you to I would love you to tell me about create your career from the inside out, because it's such a powerful process, and you've helped so many people, and you do it you see people, and you approach people with such an attitude of positivity and what is potential and how they can change their lives. And so talk a little bit about how this came to be.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I realized that I had a really unhealthy relationship to work. And it came to a head when I was at this
Large company.
large global corporation, which despite my appearance was not really the great place for me to thrive as a human being, or many other people, as it turned out. But I did manage to survive many reorganizations in my 3.5 years there. During my 3.5 years there, I had 7 positions. So what happened was there were so many reorganizations right after another that the place became very unstable and unhealthy, and people started to bail whether or not they had another job waiting for them. And I decided to stay, and this is where I realized that my relationship to work was so unhealthy, because I felt that it was important that everybody's projects came to fruition, whether or not I believed in what it was that we were doing. But I was so devoted to the team that 2 people from my team left and I decided to stay. And so a full plate was 3 projects, and so I had 11. And so I did 4 months of 12-hour days because it was really important that these websites got launched. It was very important. Children's websites needed to be launched. And so when it came time for the review, I assumed I was in line for a promotion, and instead I was handed something called a performance improvement plan because I was told I was underperforming. Now, had I been underperforming, that would have been the appropriate thing to do, but I was overperforming and everybody knew it. So I couldn't really take it to heart. So I didn't take it to heart. So what I did do is I decided to make it the most positive experience I could make. Like, how can I want to improve? I always want to improve. How can I improve? So I decided to use it as an opportunity to do that. And during the 8 weeks of this process, I had to look at myself and say, well, what's my part in this? And is this the first time I've been blamed for things that had nothing to do with me? No. What are the patterns? And so I was able to realize that I had a number of patterns that kept me. Hello? Hi, it's Lynn. Who's that? Hello? Hello? It's my phone. I just want to recognize now that I'm looking at a stack of books in Karen's apartment, and I'm seeing one that says hot sex.
One of many.
So, hot sex, how to do it.
I'm going to be borrowing a book from Karen called Hot Sex, How to Do It. So what I did was I decided to look at this as an opportunity for me to redo how my approach to work. And at the end of the 8 weeks, when they escorted me out of the building, I was greeted by 20 people at this happy hour where we could celebrate. And the next day I went online and I said, "Good news, I'm available for hire." And someone who I worked with 10 years ago, who's now become my guardian angel, Barry Gribben from Home Run Entertainment, said, "Great, we need to make a change on one of our teams. We're doing a wonderful $1 million fundraiser for Heal the Bay, a local organization. We'd love to have you join." And ever since then, I haven't had to look for work, and it's been 4 years. So something that I did worked for me, and I realized that in that process, there was a system that I had created, and I love creating systems, and I wondered, since it worked for me, can I share it with other people? So I did a prototype, a beta group, and online beta group, and I started creating this 6-step program to share with people, and I've shared it with over 50 people over the last 4 years, and it turns out that I have a 90% success rate with people who want to change their work life. And it's all based on positivity, creating a network of goodwill, recognizing what your successes are, and recognizing what your strengths are, and bringing those to the table to to really redefine what's right for you in your work world. And I've also grown to have a different understanding of work. And right now I feel that work is it's a manifestation of your soul. It's what you put out into the world. It's what you create. And it comes from a soul place.
Yeah.
So to me, it's profound and extraordinary, and it has great potential to have great impact on yourself and the people that you end up working with.
Yeah, and I love that, creating your career from the inside out. So you really do start by asking the questions like, how do you want to feel at work, right? Or like, what are a couple of the questions you
Very
ask
much.
right off?
Right. So what we do, one of the tenets is, if I shift my internal world, my external world is going to reflect it. So what we do is we define like, well, what would it feel like to have your quote unquote dream job or dream life, or to have won the lottery? And what would that feel like?
Right.
And we create that and we call that your dream job state or your dream life state. And then we try to build up your life to make it look like or feel like that as much as possible. Yeah. So I like to use music in that. So once we start, I say, congratulations, you're now in what we call a seamless transition into the next thing. And so I want you to create a seamless transition soundtrack. And I want you to use music that would reinforce how it is you feel. So I will ask you, Heidi, what are what is it you love the most about working with people doing astrology?
Well, just soulful conversations and deep connection about what matters in people's lives.
I love that. So soulful conversations. How does it feel for you to have soulful conversations with people?
Present, quiet, full.
Great. Present, quiet, and full. We're just going to start with those three. So then what I would love for you to do is start to create a music soundtrack with music that makes you feel present and quiet and full. And that way you can start to infuse that where you go, like in the car when you're picking up your kids, or like whatever, if you're like frantically driving downtown to do another podcast. Like just as an example. Because for me, what I want people to have the experience of just being surrounded by things that they love, or have experiences that they love.
Yeah.
And music, because I've done some research about how music affects the brain and it affects your mood, it is what I have read, takes only a few seconds to change your mood. It's the fastest thing to change your mood. And so going back to create your career, if you shift your internal world and if you start to feel quiet and present, you will generate more of that into your life. So, and on a more esoteric level, we go into the fifth dimensional feeling state, energetic feeling state. And when you soak yourself in that, the 3D world will catch up to it and reflect it back to you, usually in ways you would not expect. So that's what I see over and over again when we define what would feel wonderful and ideal for someone, and they start to seep themselves in that. Amazing things start to, quote unquote, come out of the blue. And I just see that happening over and over again.
I love that. Yeah, and I think also one of your gifts is that you have a tremendous amount of patience and acknowledging the small steps along the way. So Lynn, I think you've learned this, where you really said, gosh, we need to celebrate this step. We need to celebrate this moment. Whereas, I might be like, okay, yeah, we got there, whatever. You're like, wait, stop. At least let's raise our glass, or at least let's notice. And so I think that's, you've definitely taught me a lot about that.
Great. 100%.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So actually it feels like a good sweet moment to read a poem. I want you to read a poem. And actually it makes me, I would say also that you often remind me of self-care, and you often remind me of how to start more gently. And this poem is about that. And it's by William Stafford, who Naomi Shihab Nye, the poet Naomi Shihab Nye, who I love, William Stafford was one of her great mentors. And it's called Any Morning.
Okay. So you guys, just so you know, this does make me anxious.
Just think, I'll sing some music in the background.
Would you? I love when Heidi sings so much.
We'll talk about that another time.
All right, any morning. Just laying on the couch and being happy. Only humming a little, the quiet sound in the head. Trouble is busy elsewhere at the moment. It has so much to do in the world. People who might judge are mostly asleep. They can't monitor you all the time, and sometimes they forget. When dawn flows over the hedge, you can get up and act busy. Little corners like this, pieces of heaven left laying around, can be picked up and saved. People won't even see that you have them. They are so light and easy to hide. Later in the day, you can act like the others. You can shake your head. You can frown.
Yes. I just love this. I just love this in the sense of the spaciousness of the morning, and that it's kind of like this quiet pocket of being with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. And this is great. And I'm actually in the state now where I'm retraining myself to meditate in the morning with significant resistance. And I love this because this speaks so much to, like, exactly, just laying on the couch and being happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, trouble is busy elsewhere at the moment. It has so much to do in the world. Yeah, let it do it elsewhere. It's so great to be able to come back and just focus in on, like, just give yourself some time and breathe, exactly like what you just did, Heidi.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Lynn signs off all her emails with take 3 deep breaths now. Oh, wait, take 3 deep breaths. Seriously, do it now, right?
Yeah.
Which I love. And I do every time I read one of your emails, I'm like, right. Because I'm like, you know? So I appreciate which is actually really ironic too, because a lot of times Gemini people don't breathe deeply. They breathe shallowly. So I love that you're like, no, take 3 deep breaths. Seriously, do it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. It's my sign off.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I have a poem for you too.
Great.
That actually I didn't even realize I did this, but it's one of those beautiful synchronicities because it's by Naomi Shihab Nye, who so these two are very connected. And one of the things about you, Lynn, is I just feel there is a deep, deep kindness to you. You are just kind, and you can feel when another person is struggling or in pain, and in very practical ways and in very common sense ways and in very present ways, you're like, I will help. And I know that you've learned, you've had to learn some boundaries around, am I killing myself while doing this? But the truth is, the impulse is, to me, is just out of a great deep kindness. And so this poem is called Kindness.
Oh, great.
Okay?
Thanks.
Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop, the passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend?
Oh. That's weird. You're giving it to me.
That's for
Thank
you.
you.
I deeply, deeply love Naomi Shihab, and I love, I love that she is speaking a truth about joy and about kindness, that you have to honor its opposite.
100%. And what I love is the structure about this poem. It felt like, first it's about compassion. You will never know what someone else is experiencing, and let's let in some room for that. And then to understand sorrow, and that is something that I absolutely resonate with to such a depth. And to go from sorrow to find, like, the path to kindness is through the sorrow is something that I resonate with so deeply, and it's so true. It's so true, and I think compassion is a really big part of it too. But it's true. I think kindness often does come as an extension of yourself from experiencing sorrow first, and then being able to show up for someone else. 100. And this is gorgeous.
Yeah, that's for you. And actually, it's kind of perfect. I would love for you, out of the sorrow into the kindness and then into the joy. I would love to hear you talk just a bit about Joyful Boogie, because, just even like, well, how often do we hear about something that's for senior citizens that helps empower senior citizens through dance and song? I know you don't just work with senior citizens with this either. You work with all people, and you've led this at the Radiant Life Retreat before too. So,
that's right.
But just speak a little to how this came to be and how it's living in your life right now.
Absolutely. So as I was watching my parents have the options as they decline. So my dad is 92 now, and my mom passed away 6 years ago. But when they had access to, quote unquote, the best facilities for them for assisted living and for nursing care, all of the programs that I saw that were available to them, none of them were something that I saw myself wanting to go to myself later in life. So I set out to create a program that literally would be for me and for my contemporaries, and that I think could benefit seniors. And so I created this system because I love creating systems. And I've been certified in various different movement modalities, and I just saw how healing they were, and I combined them and created something called Joyful Boogie. And it's this super simple, very basic movement program that is structured on the 7 major energy centers in our body, which some people call chakras, and other people just call energy centers. And it ends up being incredibly empowering. And we use music of people's younger years that when they hear it, they go, oh, I love that song, like that. Because, so there's a lot of study being done on how music affects the brain, and particularly with seniors and with Alzheimer's patients, but I'm more interested in people who are suffering from depression and anxiety. But nevertheless, I started bringing this program into some facilities, and the responses have been just so much more positive than I could have imagined. We did a preliminary study with a physical therapist, Charmaine Clamore, amazing physical therapist, and we tracked their strength, flexibility, mobility, balance, and mood over the course of 4 weeks. We offer the program twice a week for 4 weeks, and after 8 sessions, people's responses were just off the charts positive, and their increases were incredible. And whether or not they participated, if they were in the room, they would still have the same physical benefits as the people who actually did the physical movement.
And I just want to say, you've posted some beautiful pictures of just this, I will say radiant faces of these senior citizens who are just like so bright and clear and soulful just from this moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so and also just to say, like, sometimes you'll teach a few steps, and and they might use those in a song.
Absolutely. So you can't do it wrong. So I will teach the quote unquote choreography before the song, which would be like, move your hand this way. And then this song, at this point in your song, you're going to, this is a cha-cha. So let me see you guys cha-cha. Let me see that happen. And I'm like, and if you want to do something completely different, do it. I don't care. I want to see how you move to this music. Show me what makes you happy. Show me what feels good in your body.
Yeah.
And that's how it starts. And so the idea is, and the whole idea is like, don't look at me. I don't do it like me. Do it like you. I want to see you.
Right.
Show me your shimmy, And then it gets very silly, and that's where all the laughter comes in. Because one of my favorite things in the world is to see senior citizens be disco robots. It's just one of the best possible things when they get into robot. Yeah.
This is Lynn has Venus in Aquarius right on her ascendant. So the love of groups, improvising, and then we'll say technologically, but no, really, I mean, like the love of groups and the love of bringing freedom to groups.
Yeah.
And the love of bringing improv to groups.
Yeah.
Like, be yourself, be free, be authentic. And,
absolutely. And it's about expressing yourself.
Yeah,
Express. What does this feel? Let me see that. Let me see it on your face, and let me see it in your body. Show me.
Yeah, so it's such a gift, such a liberation for any group you enter, and I mean, it's such a perfect title too, Joyful Boogie. And I mean even I at the Radiant Life retreats participating, it's like you chose the songs of our 20s, and it's like woo, and sliding around doing electric guitar, for goodness sake.
That's right. Big guitar solo, go.
Yeah, so
air
much
guitar.
Fun. Anyway, beautiful. And so it's just beautiful work. Okay, so I have my question that I like to ask about a radiant moment in your life, about a moment when, you've told us some radiant moments, but I would just ask you if there are any others where you felt the light grow.
Okay, I'm going to say this just because it came to me when you asked.
Oh, good.
And it's when I am on a Radiant Life retreat.
Oh.
And I have had such profound experiences there and expansive experiences there. And I was not an early adapter to the Radiant Life retreats. I was a little resistant for a long time. And then finally I was like,
I can't remember, but you went. Well, no, you. What was your first one? It was like.
It was 8 ago.
Okay. So okay.
So like 4 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and finally there was like enough people went
that you liked, that were your pals.
Yeah. I was like, fine, I'll go support Heidi. And when I got there, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful location. But when I saw you sit and take the teacher's seat, it was remarkable. And to see you hold that space and create this environment in this safety, and it's gorgeous. And I felt like I was in the hands of a master. And it was beautiful. I'm getting chills talking about it. And because of that, I just committed myself wholeheartedly to being there. And so what I've done is when we do like an initial opening circle, I would check in with myself and say, all right, what's up for me right now? What's happening for me right now? And I'll call on that. So like, remember, like the first one was, I was feeling like I didn't know what it felt like to feel supported. Like I knew how to do support, but I didn't know what it felt like to be supported. So I just committed my weekend to feeling supported, just focusing on that. And then after that, I watched for the next 6 months how support started coming into my life. And there were very deep changes in my life as a result. So then I was hooked, and I couldn't wait for the next one, and then the next one, and I did 7 in a row.
Wow.
And then I just started structuring my year around Marches and Octobers so that I could be there. And I've watched my life change so dramatically. And I feel having the structure of the Radiant Life Retreats has been a really huge, significant part of that for me.
Well, that's so beautiful, and thank you for saying, for articulating that. And I mean, I just want to also like honor what has been built by the women who returned. It's no longer something that I quote unquote lead. I show up and I do facilitate, but the women who return hold the space in such an incredible way. And for your Aquarius rising, to have a group of allies, to have a group of peers that are, true heart and mind peers and soul peers, like that's really key. And I think that's what we're all getting to experience, in these gatherings. But also I want to honor the fact that like early on, mostly I was like my pals. I'd be like, please come to the Radiant Life Retreat, So I really did have to do this thing where I was like, okay, we're friends, but now I'm putting on a little hat that says I'm leading this circle. Okay, now I'm taking the hat off, So, and I really honored my pals and my friends for just letting me practice in a way and letting me show up and orchestrate the things. And now it's held. And I think this is frankly where we're headed in our world. And you know this more than many, like we're headed into an Aquarian age where we have to show up in the realm of the group, and we have to empower the group and the community. And we can each step forward, yes, and do our thing, but it's the group that has to be honored and held.
100%. Yes. And I think it's such a ripe time, and I'm feeling it too, like this undercurrent underneath all of the turmoil that's happening above, what I'm calling happening above ground, but I'm just feeling underneath there's so much. I'm like, and as I'm talking, I'm just like getting this image of like chewing gum, like a ball of chewing gum just getting bigger and bigger, like pieces of gum like growing and sticking and growing, and it just feels like this strong undercurrent of forward movement, which is about compassion and kindness and love.
Yeah. Our Aquarius phrase is water of life am I, poured forth for thirsty men. So what if each of us felt that way, actually felt water of life am I, poured forth for thirsty men and women? Like, what if we each had that water, vessel, and we poured it because we're hungry, because we're thirsty, because we need nourishment? And that's the Aquarian message. We all have that to give. And I would say that's the radiant message. We're all radiant, and we just need to grow the light and pass it on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yay. Yeah. Lynn, thank you. This has been a very inspiring hour for me.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I'm so glad you're here. And thank you for walking with me on this journey. And can't wait for March when we get to play again at the Radiant Life Retreat.
Yeah, me too.
So come join us, friends. If you're in a female body right now. Later we'll open them up soon, right? Maybe the next one has to be men and women. I don't know. We'll have to see. I might just do it.
I will help you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh-oh. Did I just say that? Uh-oh.
We could always edit it out.
No. These things happen for a reason. All right, my dear friends, thank you for listening. So grateful to have you on board. If you haven't yet, go visit my website, HeidiRose.com. You can buy an astrology snapshot. You can know more about the energies that are at work in your life. You can listen to a poem. Grateful always to Karin Lee Schneider for producing and editing and making beautiful cups of tea and supporting this effort of growing the light. Big love to each and every one of you.